So as we think about material or component costs specifically, where do you see those impacts being felt?
Great question. I mean, China, by virtue of the global supply chain, occupies a very strategic, critical part of that supply chain today. And they largely control two main areas, I would say. One is the raw materials side, where a lot of specific critical elements are manufactured and processed in China. The other is the packaging and testing that happens on the back end after a chip is manufactured and sent out to be basically put together. With advanced packaging and the shift in technology that's taking place right now, OSATs or the back end testing and assembly industry that exists in China, though lower margin, still is important, and we'll likely see diversification of those facilities and those capabilities into other regions as well.
We've seen some initial supply chain rebalancing over the past couple of years. How are firms planning to navigate this looking ahead?
Well, what you can see already taking place during the last 4 years of the Biden administration and largely funded or incentivized through the CHIPS Act is companies bringing fabs, packaging facilities locally. This is challenging because, obviously China, being the manufacturing power that it is set up not only just through their economy, but through the logistics supply chain, even the organization of how they co-locate facilities one next to the other to reduce cycle times, reduce lead times between transitions. It's going to be hard to displace, is the short answer. But there are efforts that are underway. You see Apple moving to India, you see others moving to Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, etc. But yes, you will likely see that continue. Whether that is funded or not by governments remains to be seen. I likely think that will continue as well, just because of the nature of the industry and how capital intensive it is. But we'll likely see that continue and maybe increase.
Makes sense that government incentives are required to keep the playing field even for local players. On a broader scale, how do you see the market dynamics, market landscape playing out between the key competitors in the value chain?
What will likely happen is long-term with those subsidies and others to maintain that playing field, companies that are, or whose supply chain resilience is better equipped for a world with tariffs, will likely be better equipped to obviously handle profitability, margin conversations, costing, and those that are not will obviously be more affected. Those that are more affected by this might see loss of share because they're not able to compete at the same level, off at the same pricing. And that's where you might see some of these shifts in kind of the landscape, who is incumbent versus who's going to take the lead in the queue. As you know, margins, profitability, cost are huge drivers for market share and what a company is able to sustain in the long term. So I really think that the next few years we'll see an environment of resilience, if you will, right? Trying to figure out, how do I make gains in the right areas, with the right profitability, the right margin.
So obviously still a bit of uncertainty. We don't know which bullets will be fired, which tools will be used, but who do you anticipate is going to be impacted most by what reasonably expect to happen?
By design, tariffs are, right or wrong, intended to protect industries locally and obviously try to grow them and enhance their capabilities. So if we look at the short term, U.S. semiconductor manufacturers that manufacture locally or trying to grow locally will see short-term benefits. Others that are likely to benefit are countries that are allied to the U.S., where friendshoring is happening. Right? Companies that might not do as well are those that are still reliant on China. Now there's a supply base, or there might be less resilient, or have demand is farther ahead. The last outcome really is what it consumed at the end of everything that we're making, whether it's some semiconductors or wafer substrates, they all end up going into some product, whether that's your car or another phone, etc. And that the penultimate outcome is that the consumer will likely see, and at least in the short term, higher prices and a much less varied product to force them.
Awesome. So we talked about what might happen and the potential impact. So I'm a commercial leader at a semiconductor company or a company in the semiconductor value chain. What should I be looking to do?
A lot of them are doing these three things, right? First one is doing a comprehensive review of the supply chain. Where do I have exposure? Where do I not? And what decisions do I need to take? Prioritizing that exposure and figuring out what are the options. Do I diversify? Do I figure out exceptions? What are the different things in my tool belt that I can employ in the context of this specific choke point that I have in my supply chain? The second thing that one can do is really understand and exploit the incentive structures that exist today, understand what might apply, what might not. And the third, which is really the most forward-looking, is really run these scenarios and build out robust financial and supply chain modeling to understand what do potential tariffs and retaliatory tariffs look like for me specifically. What does that mean for my balance sheet? What does that mean for my supply chain? How do I need to adjust pricing in order for me to maintain margin or at least manage margin in the short term? And what are the strategic decisions that fall out from those types of activities?